I was the youngest MBA ever at Oxford University. When I graduated, I was 23. There were people on that course who were older than my father. There were people around me who were getting fired. But because I was good with people, other teams would invite me to join their teams. And I saw these guys doing comedy for the first time. I thought this was amazing. I mean, here's a guy on stage, he's got a beer in one hand, it's a microphone in the other, and he's just having fun. And that was his job. So I thought this is amazing and I need to try this. I started off 3 months later. I did 250 shows in my first 10 months. I was completely broke at the end of that. I strongly believe in the quote by George Bernard Shaw. He said, never wrestle with a pig because you get dirty and the pig enjoys it.
Greetings everyone. In this edition of Exploring Minds, we have a very interesting guest with us. A management consultant turned stand-up comedian, the master of roasting, none other than PapaCJ. Welcome to the show, sir. Super excited to have you.
Thanks, Shivank. For starters, don't call me sir. I have not yet been knighted by the Queen or the new King.
Perfect. What's up with your life? What are you up to nowadays?
Oh, I'm traveling like a mad person because between the comedy and the leadership coaching, there's just so much going on right now. So I'm in a very good space. I'm loving the work that I'm doing and trying to just add as much value as I possibly can to the various people who invite me.
It's such an unconventional path. And there is a wave of stand-up comedian now. But you started this when almost nobody was doing that in India. Tell us. And you were doing your MBA.
For starters, thank you for inviting me to your podcast and calling me an old man, but thanks.
You were doing your MBA at Oxford and you joined a managing consulting firm in London. Yeah. How did the shift happen to this thing?
So I joined a consulting firm in the year 2000 in London. That's when the dot-com crash happened as well. So I spent 3 years in this firm and I was very enthusiastic to have a really successful corporate career. But because of the time that was, there wasn't much work around. I was also a unique person in the consulting firm. You see, normally if you get employed as an analyst, you're 21 years old, you've just graduated from college, you go in as an analyst. If you get employed as a consultant, you're 27, 28, and you come in at that level with a few years of work experience. Now, I was the youngest MBA ever at Oxford University. When I graduated, I was 23. There were people on that course who were older than my father. So I was neither an analyst because I had an MBA, nor was I a consultant because I was 23, I didn't have that work ex. So I think the organization also found it difficult to figure out where to place me. As a result, within the company, over 3 years, I had 6 different jobs. There were people around me who were getting fired. But because I was good with people, other teams would invite me to join their teams. So it took about 3 years for me to pay off all my student loans for my MBA. And then I took a sabbatical. And I went to the Edinburgh Festival. And I saw these guys doing comedy for the first time. I thought this was amazing. I mean, here's a guy on stage, he's got a beer in one hand, he's a microphone in the other, and he's just having fun. And that was his job. So I thought this is amazing and I need to try this. I had never seen stand-up comedy before, no experience, no confidence I could be funny or not. I started off 3 months later. I did 250 shows in my first 10 months. I was completely broke at the end of that. So I joined a recruitment firm. I used to work in the day, perform at night. And even though I was working for 8 hours a day and doing 10 minutes of comedy at night, in my head, I was a comedian. And the job was, so to say, a side hustle. And then one of my clients was a company that did corporate training and leadership coaching. So I qualified as a coach with them. With them, I trained over 50 companies all over the world. Google, Nike, Accenture, Deutsche Bank, UBS, BBC, Universal Music. And that supported me financially while I could pursue comedy. So I did about 700 shows in the first 3 years. In fact, I remember when I started doing comedy, I used to wake up every day at, say, 10:30, 11, cook one meal for myself at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, get into some comedian's car to drive to some city in the UK. It's about 4 in the afternoon. We would drive 3 or 4 hours, get to this place, I would be performing between 5 and 10 minutes. I was getting paid no money. Wait till the end of the show. Get dropped off in the outskirts of London at about 1:32 in the morning. Pay the driver my share of petrol. And all these shows I was getting paid nothing. I couldn't afford a taxi. I would change 3 different buses, sometimes waiting for 45 minutes in cold London winter. And I would get home at about 4:30 or 5 in the morning. I did this every single day for an entire year. At the end of that year, I had no money, no relationships, no friends, and no life. But every single comedy promoter in the country knew my name. So that's how that journey started.
And you took a gap year also and you explored multiple things. How was that?
So this was the gap year actually. When I took that sabbatical, I tried many different things. I went to Kerala, I did some backpacking there. I set up a charity that supported underprivileged kids in Bengal. I started doing stand-up comedy. I think it was a wonderful thing to do because, you know, when we grow up in India, we don't have a concept of a gap year. We have this concept of everyone says, "Beta, settle ho jao." Right? Now, what does being settled mean? You do your college, you do a master's degree, you get a job, you get married, you have 2 children, then you're, so to say, settled. You know, and you know, when people ask me, people your age, 22, 23, that, you know, what advice would you give somebody? There are 3 pieces of advice I would give. 1, financial independence is the only independence, right? Today, even as a comedian, you know, it's very fashionable now to say, oh, follow your passion. Passion does not put food on the table, right? Now, even as a comedian, I know that there are some shows I need to do to feed the stomach, and there are some shows I do to feed the soul. What you need to do to feed the stomach is what finances you to do the things you want to do to feed the soul. There is no shame in that, right? And until it gets to a point where you can only do the soul shows and they are financially viable as well. I mean, let's be honest, Shah Rukh Khan bhi shaadiyon mein nachta hai, right? Hum kaun hai? So that's the first piece of advice I would give you. The second piece of advice I would give you is, please declare war on the word should. We grow up in a society which is saying this is how you should live your life. This is what you should do. You know, log kya kahenge? Log kya kahenge is the other thing. Let me just divert from that. Our parents' generation which to say, "Arey, you should do this." Log kya kahenge? What will people say? For your generation, unfortunately, you have social media, which is your generation's version of log kya kahenge. Because people's sense of self-worth is coming from external validation. How many likes will I get? How many shares will I get? It's the same thing. It's just log kya kahenge, what will people say, packaged in a different bottle. Right? Don't let your sense of self-worth be driven by external validation. Right? Declare war on the word should, because there is no right way. You just have to figure out the way that is right for you. I know so many people who have followed what is considered the successful path, done this whole marriage, career, who are CEOs, young CEOs making lots of money, and they are miserable. Right? Because in my belief, the only wealth is time wealth. It is the only asset you will never get back. I see these guys who are sitting in these fancy offices making millions of dollars. They have no time for their health, they have no time for their family, they have no time for the things they really care about. But they get to go to their friends and say, "Arey, so-and-so, look, he's doing so well." It's meaningless. And you don't want to get to a point when you realize how meaningless it is. It's better you realize that earlier in life.
So एक trade-off होता है. So I was meeting a very financially well-off person in a investment bank, and he was saying कि मुझे शुरुआत में स्कूबा डाइविंग करनी थी, लेकिन मेरे पास पैसे नहीं थे.
जी.
आज मेरे पास इतना सारा पैसा है कि मैं इतने सारे लोगों को स्कूबा डाइविंग करा सकता हूँ, लेकिन जब मैं स्कूबा डाइविंग करने गया तो मेरे पास हेल्थ नहीं थी. उन्होंने मेरे को मना कर दिया, 50 साल से ऊपर हो, आप नहीं कर सकते. तो देयर इज अ ट्रेड ऑफ व्हेन यू हैव एनर्जी एंड टाइम बट यू डोंट हैव मनी. And yes, at certain point of time, you have lots of money, but you don't have time and energy. So how do you balance this thing?
Firstly, I think, I don't remember whether it was the Dalai Lama who said it, that we waste most of our health trying to get money, and then we spend the same money trying to get back our health.
Right.
So here's a question I normally ask young people like you, right? So let me ask you that question. If you had $1 billion in the bank.
This was my second question, but go ahead.
If you had $1 billion in the bank, how would you spend your time? Not what would you buy, how would you spend your time? Answer that question.
If I had one, of course, I would be not doing anything to feed off my stomach.
Forget that. You have $1 billion. You have Bill Gates' money, which is more than $1 billion. How will you spend your time?
I'll spend my time in some philanthropic project or, helping the education in the country.
Like what?
Like I'll create a university like Plaksha.
Okay. Now, very often when I ask somebody your age this question, the answer I get is, oh, I'll travel. I said, okay, where will you go? I'll go to Europe. How long will you go? For 1 month. Now, there was a book called The Frommer's Guide to Europe on $50 a day. Now, why am I asking this question? What I'm trying to get you to is that the cost of your dreams is far lower than whatever imaginary figure you might have in mind, right? Very often we don't make the effort to actually calculate that cost. The second question I often ask is, please calculate how much money you need from today until the day you die. Now, when I ask somebody who's my age that question, most people have not done this math, right? I'm saying you account for everything: marriage, education, holidays, health, children's, whatever it is. A lot of people who I speak to, I say, okay, calculate that number. From that, subtract the value of what you've already got, divided by the number of working years you've got left. Most people find that they are earning far more than they need to fulfill every single obligation that they'll ever have. Which brings me back to question 1. Why are you not living the life of your dreams? Now, today for you to pursue philanthropic initiatives, you don't need $1 billion, right? You can do that alongside. The other thing to keep in mind is that you don't have to start by setting up a university, right? You can start with philanthropy that is smaller. There's a wonderful story of that boy walking on the beach with his father, and he's taking these fish and he's throwing them back into the ocean. And his father says, you know, son, you can't save all the fish. He said, I know, but I can save these ones, right? So there are philanthropic initiatives that you can take at your level today. I mean, you may 20 years from now want to set up a university. You're an educated young man. You can take the initiative for an hour a week to work with underprivileged children and educate them, help them on their journey. So, you know, these are conversations I like having with people, because all the research on happiness, right? There was I think this is very popular, there was an Australian nurse called Bronnie Ware, and she worked with terminally ill patients, and she asked them their 5 greatest regrets. Their regrets were, I worked too hard, I did not live a life that was true to myself, I didn't spend enough time with people that I cared about. If you look at the Harvard Happiness Project, which was conducted over, I think it's now must be about 85 years now, right? They have found that across income groups, across countries, across all sorts of backgrounds, the greatest reason for your happiness is the quality of your relationships. And yet, that is the one thing that we compromise on our journey to, so to say, find success. For me today, I treat relationships like I treat careers, like people treat careers, right? I make the effort to spend quality time with people who I respect and admire, and relationships that are important to me. I will literally plan it like a meeting. I mean, today, for example, I could be sitting in Los Angeles and shooting a sitcom. But when I'm at home, every single day, I wake up in the morning and I go to my local cafe. I spend an hour or an hour and a half with my mother and father, and we start the day like that. There is no amount of money or career success that is more valuable to me than that, because I don't want to look back 20 years down the line with whatever Hollywood references of billions of dollars and think, oh no, I wish I had more time with my mom and dad. So those are my values. So the advice I would give is, please understand what your values are and live a life that is true to those values. Otherwise, you will eventually end up unhappy. And you don't need to get to 40, work hard, get to this point, and then go scuba diving, right? You can live your values along the way at whatever level of income you may have.
But the same question to you. If you had $1 billion at this stage,
Yeah.
how would you spend your time?
I wouldn't do anything different. I am very privileged, and I understand it comes from a position of privilege, that today I can choose to do only the things that I want to do or enjoy doing. My purpose, I believe, is to uplift others and help them be better versions of themselves. So everything I do falls under that banner. It's stand-up comedy, which is making people laugh. It's leadership or executive coaching to individuals, which helps them realize their dreams. I do something called a happiness project. I will go to the homes of terminally ill patients. I will work with cancer patients, and I will perform for free, just for them and their families in their bedrooms. There could be 2 people, there could be 6 people. So these are things that give me joy. The other thing I do is, so there's there's an old quote by Steve Jobs, which is that creativity is connecting the dots. We've all heard that. I also believe that curiosity is collecting the dots. I love collecting dots. Some of those dots come by virtue of the kind of books that I'm reading, but many of those dots come from people I meet. I am genuinely interested in other human beings, what their thinking process is, what their journey is. So I love meeting people, spending an hour and a half and having deep conversations, getting to know how they think, what matters to them. Today, as a result of my diverse interests, I have a Latin dance community that I'm a part of, a motorcycle group that I'm a part of, a biking group that I'm a part of, the executive coaching community, the comedian community. So my network of people is so diverse. As a result, I'm constantly getting these diverse ideas and thoughts and thinking, which makes for a very rich life. And at least 10 times a week, and I'm not even exaggerating, I'm connecting 2 different people who can help each other out. Because I'm having a conversation with somebody, while that conversation is happening, I'm immediately thinking, you know what, I know somebody who is doing something very different, who may be out of your network. Let me get you guys to talk together. I'm sure you can find some common ground. You know, whether it is, in the last 2 days, I've connected somebody in the startup community, somebody who works for a journalist. There's just so many dots that are constantly being connected.
So 2 questions here. One, you're saying that it's always about people, and you have a network of people.
Ji.
You have worked hard,
Yeah.
number one, to find that this is something that you're passionate about. So
Yes.
how was your journey? How did you figure out that this is exactly what I'm passionate about? This is something that I love it.
See, firstly, I don't think it is important for you to have everything figured out. None of us have it figured out. I think it's important to constantly be a work in progress. You know, if the second you think perfection is a problem. Strive for excellence, great. If you strive for perfection, you're always going to be unhappy because perfection is unreachable. You know, there's always be, you'll always feel deficient in some way. So, I forget whose quote this is, but you can be a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time. I think what's important is continuous learning. Now, when you speak about finding your passion or the thing you do, you can't find it sitting at home watching Netflix, right? You've got to try different things. You've got to give enough time and commitment and effort, you know. With stand-up comedy, everybody who starts doing stand-up, your first few shows will be terrible, right? At least in London, we used to say you are not a comedian until you've done at least 100 shows. Now, if you do your first 10 shows, have bad shows and decide, yaar, ye mere se nahi hota, I can't do this is too tough for me, you're never going to make it anyway, right? And it's like when Sachin Tendulkar started playing cricket, his first shot wasn't a fantastic shot, he also had to learn.
Right.
But the second you hit that first good shot, the second you get that first big laugh as a comedian on stage, you're hooked. Then you keep chasing that feeling, I want that again, I want that again. So I would say, try different things, keep experimenting, give it enough time and commitment, and over time you will figure out, this is something that I want. This is a feeling that I want to chase. Sure, there are things you might figure out that, you know what, maybe I just don't have the skills for this, maybe I don't enjoy it. In many cases, You will have the skills for it, right? But you may not enjoy it. That doesn't mean just because you can do it, you should. I got an all India rank in the CA foundation exam. I'm not a chartered accountant today because that's not something I wanted to pursue.
So talking about relationship and people around you, ये बताइए सर कि how did you meet the most important people in your life?
By taking the initiative.
What was the story? You may not need to tell the name of the person, but how did you meet the most important people in your life?
The most important people I met because they gave me birth. Those are the two most important people in my life.
Apart
right?
from that, of course, yeah.
Apart from that, you take the initiative. You know, when you see somebody interesting, when you've come down, I'll give you an example. 2 days ago, I was taking part in this golf tournament. There were a bunch of other golfers. We were staying at the Hyatt Hotel in Delhi. I came down for breakfast. I noticed a gentleman sitting alone who was a part of that community. I said, is it okay if I come and join you? I sat with him. We spoke for over an hour. It was the most wonderful conversation. And he's such a lovely, lovely man. And we have discovered 5 ways in which we can collaborate and do things together. So it's taking that initiative to say, is it okay if I join you? They may say no, no problem. The other thing that I think is really important, it is not important for you to be interesting. It is important for you to be interested. Please be interested in the other person. You cannot go into relationships with a transactional mindset. मुझे उससे क्या मिलेगा? What can I get out of them? If you can go into relationships thinking, what value can I add to this person's life? मैं उनके लिए क्या कर सकता हूँ? To actively seek out ways in which you can help others, it will come back to you multiple fold. People will look for ways in which they can make your life better. But don't go in there with a transactional mindset. कि अगर मैं इनके लिए ये करूँगा, ये मेरे लिए ये करेंगे. Don't do that. It's not a nice way to work. Also, sorry, if I know you were about to ask a question.
No, please.
This is exactly what Adam Grant talks about in his book Give and Take. He talks about givers, takers, and matchers. Right? Givers are people who actively give without looking for reciprocity, and all his research has shown that they're far more successful. Matchers are the kind where, Acha, he's done this much for me, I'll also do that much. And takers are people who want to take value.
So, relationship and people building की आपने बात की. What are some mistakes that you did in your relationship process, in your, with your people around you, which you will say कि यार ये 22-year-old को नहीं करनी चाहिए?
See, what happens is often you focus on the task, on the job. You think if I'm good at my job, I will be successful. Right? Now today, in my experience, it doesn't matter which profession it is. Your success comes down to relationships, networks, and personal brand. 80% of people can do the job. They can do the job satisfactorily. It all comes down to the process, who do you want to work with? In consulting, when you do interviews, you talk about something called the airport test, which is if I was catching a flight and I missed that flight and I had to spend the next 6 hours at the airport with this person, can I spend 6 hours with that person? Think about it. तुम्हारे 4 दोस्त हैं. There's a project that has come up, right? तुमको पता है कि यार इन 4 दोस्तों में ना, this one person is a joy to work with. All of them have the same level of ability. There's another guy who may be slightly better, but is a bit painful to work with. Very arrogant, यार मेरे को सब कुछ पता है. Maybe very intelligent. Who are you going to pick?
Of course.
The person who's easy to work with. It's as simple as that. You need to be somebody who people like to be around, who people like to work with. Today, if you look at one of your co-founders of Plaksha University, Dr. Ritesh Malik, right? What is the reason for his success? He's the most wonderful human being. He's constantly looking for ways to try and help other people, to support other people. He treats people with so much respect, with so much dignity.
Extremely humble.
Right? Look at his humility. I can bet you, I don't care how much intelligence or knowledge or whatever he has, 90% of his success is because of who he is as a human being. Because people want him to win.
आपने बोला एक relationship, personal branding, and what was the third thing? Network. Tell us about personal branding. How do you create personal branding? What is it is all about?
See, now there are 2 sides to it, right? What is a personal brand? Basically, it's about how people perceive you. You will know this also. आपके family में भी, अरे यार वो तो हमेशा लेट आता है, right? वो तो ऐसा है, right? So people will create a perception of you whether or not you like it. Right? They will have an impression of you. Essentially what personal branding is you actively managing that perception as to how people perceive you. Now there are 2 or 3 elements to it. One of course is communication, it's getting it out there. The second is something called unity. Now your personal brand needs to be something you live. You are able to live all the time even when nobody is watching, because you can't fake it constantly. Now you may go and say, oh, I'm a teetotaler, all that. Instagram pe jaate ho, you've got photographs of you doing tequila shots. Not going to work. But there's a flip side to it as well. I don't think, and I say this as somebody who teaches personal branding as well, I run sessions on it. I think what's really important is that you are authentic as a human being. Right? You cannot continuously in the long term be somebody who you're not. Right? So you need to be authentic to who you are. That being said, authenticity is not an excuse to be mean to other people. This is who I am, take it or leave it, be mean. I forget who's that? Seth Godin. Right? Now Seth Godin, for example, talks about how people use authenticity as an excuse. Everybody talks about authenticity, so do I. I think it's really important. But it cannot be an excuse for you to behave in a way that is not appropriate. The example he gives is a surgeon, a heart surgeon is coming into a surgery. He's having a lousy day. So his authentic behavior could be, "Arey nahi yaar, I'll be lazy." No, you are expected to be your best self on that day and do what you got to do. So there are 2 sides to it. When it comes to personal branding, essentially it's about how people perceive you. Right? And it reminds me of a wonderful quote which I saw in a Buddhist monastery. It says, your behavior is your only introduction. Today it does not matter how talented you are, how successful you are, whatever you have achieved. If I was to meet you, or you were to meet you, and I treated you disrespectfully, right? You don't care about how successful I am. As far as you're concerned, I don't like this person, right? So it's like when you go to a restaurant, no matter how successful that person is, if when he calls the waiter, he's like, hey, instantly you're like, you know what, I never want to work with this person ever, because that's how he treats other human beings.
Stand-up comedy की आपने बात की कि you did 250 shows in 10 months,
yeah.
But you were broke.
Yes.
There are a lot of people जिनको stand-up comedy करनी है.
जी.
पैसे नहीं बनते. What's the reason?
पैसे नहीं बनते.
क्यों कोई?
See, when I started out in London, India, it's still easier to be a comedian, but now a little harder than it was 10 years ago.
Because of lot of folks.
So in London, there were 500 new comics who wanted that same 5-minute spot at that club. Now that club is a business. Why should they pay you? They have 400 comedians who will do it for free. As simple as that. Sheer supply and demand. Until it gets to a point where you are good enough to say, sorry, I won't do it for free. If you want me to come, you have to pay.
और इंडिया में कैसा होता है?
India, it was interesting because I came back at the end of 2007. There was no stand-up comedy. I remember I met an aunt and she said, "Beta, तुम क्या करते हो?" I said, "Auntie, मैं comedian हूँ, मैं joke सुनाता हूँ." So she said, "बेटा, joke तो मैं भी सुनाती हूँ. तुम काम क्या करते हो?" So initially, when I came, I did a couple of national tours as an individual. Then early 2009, I started off the stand-up comedy circuit, the English language circuit in Delhi. There was no circuit. So young comics would come and I created a safe space for them to perform, because initially it's difficult. People will heckle you, you don't know how to deal with that. So I ensured that there was a safe space. Then as it grew, people started running their own shows and I wasn't required to be there to support the circuit. Then I started doing a lot more corporate shows for companies. That's where some of the money comes in. Again, it's that balance, feeding the stomach, feeding the soul. There are some shows you'll do for the money. There are some shows you'll do because that's where the passion and the love in which you enjoy the most.
So stand-up comedy में, there are places when you are recording something.
जी.
आपके पास एक joke होते हैं जो आप रट के जाते हो.
जी.
मैं ऐसे बोलूँगा.
जी.
But when you are doing stand-up, there is lot of stuff that you do impromptu.
Yes.
So is it an art or it's a science?
I think it's both. When I started doing comedy, I started in London. Now I had not grown up in the UK. I did not understand their cultural references. I didn't follow their politics. I wasn't interested in the football. So I used to do jokes. I have written these jokes in advance. I'm going to get on stage and I'm going to say these jokes. Right? Also, I used to get only 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, you don't have the luxury of telling a 3-minute long story, right? Because otherwise, you'll have 1.5 laughs in that full 5 minutes. So you go and bang, 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 bang. For me, it was a science at that point. I had spreadsheets with jokes. I knew I had a sequence about a beggar. It is 90 seconds long. There are 13 punchlines. There is a laugh every 7 seconds. Every single show of mine, I used to record, hear back, see what's working, see what's not. I knew what the strong jokes were. I knew what the weak jokes were. So if you think of a graph, you start strong, you end strong. In the middle, if you do too much of weak stuff, you lose the audience. So start strong, strong, weak, strong, weak, strong, weak, end really strong. So it was that scientific. Then I moved back to India. Now, India, I have grown up here. मेरे को cricket पता है, politics पता है. I know the culture. I started doing, so now I can get on stage and do 45 minutes without using one single pre-written joke or line. In fact, I challenge myself to do that. I will only do pre-written jokes if I need to. Until then, I'm just chatting with the audience. It's more exciting for me as well because I have no idea what they're going to say and I have to instantly make it funny. Right? So it's challenging for me. For the audience, it's a unique experience because they know nobody else in the world has ever seen that show or will ever see because it's being made up on the spot based on those interactions. So that part is art. You know, I love that uncertainty of it. But it's a combination of art and science. I know कि अगर वो नहीं चले, if there is something there that doesn't hit, I've got these guns in the back, which are my pre-written jokes, which I can just, I've got the room up, I can go back to interacting. And that's one of the conversations I was having with you earlier before this podcast about Plaksha. And it's something I mentioned to Ritesh earlier today as well. I love the multidisciplinary approach that you have. Today, I do leadership coaching and I do stand-up comedy. The magic lies in the place where that overlaps. Because I can bring to the table what no comedian does and what no leadership coach does. You know, comedy is the greatest asset in my coaching. Why? Very often you get leadership coaches or trainers who are very dry, you know, or very theoretical. But because of the nature of who I am and what I do as a comedian, it allows people to relax. It allows people to open up and have honest, transparent conversations with me. Now, when you have those honest, transparent conversations, when you trust the person you're talking to, they're able to tell you things which everybody else in the leadership team is thinking, but nobody's talking about. I get those anonymous results. On the first day of the first session of that strategic offsite, I throw that on the wall. And I tell the leadership team, this is what all of you are thinking. Now what do we do? So it's a great asset. But coming back to the Plaksha conversation, I think what's really important is today one of the key skills you need to succeed is your ability to adapt to change, because we are changing far more than ever before, right? I mean, now the big thing is AI. We don't know what's going to happen with it in the next few years, generative AI, whatever else the case might be. So you need to be able to be light on your feet. With the scientific disciplines, a lot of what you're doing is you're dealing with fixed variables or things that are fixed, right? Whereas if you look at this improv that I spoke to you about, so in my world, the pre-written jokes are those fixed variables. I've done them 100 times before in front of 100 different audience. I know they work. Improv is completely unstructured. So I think it's very important. So on your campus, whether you had dance, art, music, whatever the case might be, you want to be able to get uncertain variables in and make something about it. You're going to live in a world where you will never have all the variables in place. I mean, people talk about a VUCA world, right? So can you learn how to be comfortable with uncertainty? Can you take unstructured inputs, right, and still create value and output from that, and also learn how to be happy with it, to be honest?
So tell us something where you recently discovered, figured out a thing, and you adapted yourself very quickly. Give us an example.
I was running a massive leadership workshop in Switzerland for a very senior team. We had 14 people from 12 different countries. Their salaries, I think, were between, I'd say, $300,000 a year and $3 million a year. Right? So 24 crores annual salary. It is a 3-day workshop. I had fully planned it. First day morning this, second day this. After the thing that we had on the second morning, it occurred to me that what I was planning for the second half may not give them as much value as doing something else. So I had them all sitting down and I said, this is what I had planned to do. But given what we did this morning, I think this might give us some greater value. What do you think? They said, yes, I think we should do that. Now on the afternoon, that second afternoon where I adapted and did something completely different, I had 14 people sitting in a room and they were this much short of abusing each other, right? I had created this environment where you can have openness, honesty. Somebody was saying, I did the work, you did the credit, you took the credit, you went to the senior guy to present, what happened to me? It was chaos, right? And I'm thinking there, sitting there thinking, yaar, meri to fat gayi, right? I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. So anyway, after some time, I called a break. I said, why don't we take some time out, get a cup of coffee, come back. Then there's one person in that group who I had worked with extensively in the previous year. And he was somebody I had coached individually. So I called him, I said, boss, kya kare? Like, what do I do? So he said, listen, I think these are the things that you should be able to do to get the whole thing back. So we planned it together in that break. And first when they came back, I said, I actually did that on purpose. I wanted you to get things off your chest. There was no such plan, boss. And then we got it back together. And at the end of the day, when that day ended, there was an Italian gentleman, one of the senior most people, the second senior most person in that room, who said, I want to say something. And impromptu on his own, he got up and he said that, when you were coming, I said, okay, let me see what this person is like. He says, but after today, you are my gold standard for anything that I will ever look for in a coach. Because the way you've handled today, he had no idea that for a part of the time I had no clue what I was doing, But that's how it worked out. So I think it's important, one, to be flexible and adapt to the other people who you're looking to serve, right? But also to realize when you're out of your depth and to ask for help. Today, the greatest challenge in senior people in organizations is, one, they're very lonely. They can't show weakness at home. They can't show weakness at work. They have nobody to talk to. And they feel that if I ask somebody for help, it shows that I'm not good at my job. Please remember, none of us are good at everything. If you're struggling with something or if you need help, ask for help. There is no shame in that. None of us are perfect. None of us are great at everything. And in that process, you will learn. Today, if I was in the same situation I was in, I know today that workshop I ran, I did part A and then part B. I know today whenever I run a workshop, part B should come first and part A should come second. Right? But I wouldn't have learned that had I not put myself in that situation. So yeah.
हम individual coaching की बात करेंगे सर
जी.
लेकिन उससे पहले tell us, because you're guiding a lot of organization. There are a lot of people who are future entrepreneurs and they're going to build next generation of organization. इतनी बड़ी जगहों पे, what are some top 5 problems that you see in different organization and how do you go about solving them? Top 5 biggest problems.
I'll tell you the top 5 biggest problems I see in organizations. 1, people are incentivized vertically, but you want them to collaborate horizontally.
Can you deep dive into that?
Marketing department is not talking to finance department, is not talking to legal department, etc. Is not talking to sales, right? They're all doing their different things. Thoda sa information interchange hota hai. But when you get a cross-functional group together, very often you find 4 different people are solving the same problem. कोई एक चीज़ कर रहा है, कोई दूसरी चीज़ कर रहा है. There's a wastage of resources, there's a duplication of effort, and you're not getting 4 different minds together to solve the same problem.
How do you solve this?
By getting them to talk to each other. Simple, right? By improving the quality of relationships between people. Otherwise, they don't need to interact very often. Business runs, right? That's one. 2 is क़यामत से क़यामत तक, quarter से quarter तक. The people who should be thinking about the future of the organization and where it's going are so focused on the next quarter that nobody is steering the ship. So short-term mentality and short-term targets are stopping people from looking at the future. That's the second bigger problem. Third problem is succession planning, right? A lot of organizations do not have a second level of command. Why? Because even that guy right at the top is insecure. If I make myself replaceable, मेरे लिए क्या होगा? What is going to be there for me? Nobody has charted that out. That's number 3. Number 4, people sitting at the top here create this strategy for the organization. One problem that happens is that strategy is not clearly communicated towards the bottom. Second problem that happens is even if that strategy is communicated to the bottom, that person at the bottom does not know what to do differently in his or her day-to-day job in order to execute that strategy. So these are some of the things that I'm seeing that are happening in organizations. And one more thing is that very often what happens is nobody is making the effort in organizations to align the personal goals of people who work to the goals of the organization.
How do you do that?
I'll give you an example. If I was to ask you, what is your dream? आपका सपना क्या है? अरे सर मेरे को ये टारगेट हिट हो जाए. I said no, forget the organization. आपका सपना क्या है? मुझे अपने माँ के लिए घर खरीदना. I want to buy my mother a house. Okay, what do you need to do in order to do that? Sir, अगर मेरे पास इतने पैसे होते ना, if I had this much money, I could do it. What do you need to do in order to get that much money? Sir, if I can hit these targets, okay. What is coming in the way of you hitting those targets, and how can I help you? As simple as that. And then you find a way to help that person get there. Now, that person is no longer looking to hit a target, right? He is looking to get his mother a house. Have you seen how we have made that mental alignment?
Right.
When that person who works in your organization can feel that this person is here for me, not for what I can do for the organization, right? He is here to support my dreams. Then they will put everything in. The other mistake that often happens is that we have a specific path of promotion. Let's assume you're a very good engineer, right? You're doing a great job. अब आपको promotion दे दिया है. They have promoted you and made you manager, right? Now, when you are at this level, your job is to manage the business. When you're at this level, your job is to manage the people who manage the business.
Right.
Now, just because you're good at this doesn't mean you're good at this. Now you have become a manager. You are not good at managing these engineers, and the thing that you are good at, you are no longer doing. Somebody else is doing that. You're miserable. So it's very important for organizations to understand what success means to the other person, right? You can promote them without, it can be a technical promotion without being a managerial promotion. There was a client I was working with in Australia. He said, I thought that I made it 9 to 5 or 9 to 4 for my company, only Monday to Friday. I thought everyone has got work-life balance. But there were people who were miserable. Because one guy said, I'm happy to work till 12 o'clock at night every day. But on Wednesday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, my son has football practice. I need to be there for that, right? There was a company I'm working with in Mumbai. They have designers, they have workers. Now, designers want to work 4 days a week, right? So at one point for everybody in the organization, he made it 5 days a week. Designers were unhappy because they wanted to work 4 days a week. The factory workers were unhappy because they wanted to work 6 days a week because they needed the extra money. So what you have to realize is that work-life balance means different things to different people. If you can customize for the individuals in your organization, and it takes effort, then I think you're on a real winning streak.
Also, you spoke about people not creating the second line of command because they think, अगर मैंने इसको ही सिखा दिया, तो I'll become irreplaceable. Yeah. What's the solution to that?
Solution to that is for the guy who's at the top, you have to show him कि उसके लिए क्या है future में, right? And then you have to tell him, यार अगर तू यहाँ पहुँचना चाहता है ना, हम तुम्हारे लिए ये कर सकते हैं. He's like, "Arey yaar, amazing, I want this. But sir, we cannot give you this. If we give you this, तो आपका काम कौन करेगा?" So until you can find someone who can do what you are currently doing, we can't give you this. So that's what it is.
Now coming to the individual coaching.
जी.
आप इतने सारे लोगों को कोच करते हो, and all these are accomplished people.
जी.
Tell us what are these problems that these guys are facing?
See, basically, what is coaching? What coaching is, in very simple form, this is my current reality. This is my future ideal self. How do I use my strengths to get from here to there? That is the simple
But
process.
first you need to understand your current reality and your aspirations.
Exactly. So, this is the simple thing. Now, first you have to understand what is my current reality. What are my habits? What are my patterns? What are my blind spots? How are the things that I'm behaving, the ways in which I'm behaving that I may not even be conscious of. Today somebody says, oh, my family is important, my health is important. I get their executive assistant to map their diary for 1 month. Right. After 1 month, I put that diary on the wall and said, you said these are the 5 things that are important to you. Here is your calendar. Right. You said these are the things that are important to you, but you are spending only half an hour in 1 week on exercise. Right. You are spending only 45 minutes or X amount of time with family. So that comes as a shock, saying, oh my God, this is how I'm spending my time, or this is how I'm spending my energy, as opposed to the things that I'm saying that are important to me. Also, your future ideal self, what are your values? You know, first make that clear. What are you going towards? Very often we haven't even thought about that. So once you've made that clear, then you say, okay, if I need to go from here to there, how can I get there? You also need to get an understanding of what your strengths are. अब सचिन तेंदुलकर से तुम बास्केटबॉल नहीं खिलवाओगे, तू क्रिकेटर है, तू बैट्समैन, तू बैटिंग कर. So how can you work in a way so that you're leveraging your strengths and going to where you want to go? So that's the base thing. But a lot of it is introspection. The coach's job is not to provide you answers. The coach's job is to ask you the right questions, right? And for you to introspect, and then it's a process of experimentation where we ask the right questions and we say, okay, for the next 2 weeks, should we try, what would you like to try? I would like to try this differently. Let's see how that works. And through trial and error, you figure out the things that work for you and you go on that path.
Speaking about asking the right questions, in your personal coaching, tell us some hard questions that you ask which help an individual to, you know, understand themselves, reflect and get better.
Okay. I can put you through this exercise.
That would be nice.
See, if I were to put you through the exercise, it's a longer exercise, but let me tell you what I would do, because
maybe we can do a small just so that people get...
Okay. So I'll ask you the questions. How old are you, Shivank?
23.
You're 23.
Turning 23, yeah.
Okay. Now, just close your eyes for a second. Imagine it is your 60th birthday and there is a birthday party, there is a celebration. Right? Who are the people? Firstly, what kind of a party is it? Where is it? What kind of a party is it? Who are the people who are there? Some of them are giving speeches. What are the kinds of things they're saying about you on your 60th birthday? Of the things that they're saying, what are the things that are making you emotional? Just think about that and answer that question for me.
Okay, so this is happening at my place. I don't own a farmhouse, but I'm thinking that by the time of 60, I have a very nice farmhouse. I've asked all my close friends, my family members, and because I'm 60, my friends of my, you know, children.
Who are some of these close friends? Let's be specific.
Maybe Angad, maybe Rachit,
Okay.
maybe Ayush.
Okay. I like the fact that you're saying maybe. You're not sure if they'll be around by then. Okay. Now, what are the kinds, they're giving speeches about you. What are the kinds of things they're saying about Shivank and his 60 years on the planet? And from the things that they're saying, what are the things that are making you emotional? What are the things they're saying about you as a human being?
Things like, you know, I was in this situation, but Shivank, you know, helped me that way, and this had a very huge impact on my life. This is something that I admire, or this is
What are the things that they admire?
That he was in this position, but he took some decisions like this and, made a very different choice and then succeeded. Things like that.
What are the qualities that they admire about you? What are the things they're talking about? What are specific qualities besides you helping somebody in a time of need? What else?
Maybe humility, maybe doing things that without doing things without any transactional, what you were saying. Okay, I don't want anything in return, but I'm just helping. Things like that.
Okay. Now, imagine you've stepped away from this party and you're taking a little walk on the beach and you're reflecting back on your life. What are some of the thoughts that are coming on your mind?
Maybe health, maybe how much impact I have made to the world. How many people have been impacted, how many people have, changed their sphere of life because of me. How many jobs I am able to create. How could I, do that more? How could I have impacted more people? Second thing, have I traveled the world? Is my health good enough? Am I capable to, ride a mountain in 50 years of age? That I would be thinking.
60.
Yeah.
Okay. Now imagine you're walking on this beach. Right? You're a 60-year-old Shivank, and you see a little figure coming towards you. When that figure comes towards you, you realize that that person who's come close to you is 23-year-old Shivank. What is the first question that 23-year-old Shivank asks 60-year-old Shivank, and what is your answer?
I would ask, tell me something which you would have avoided in your early days.
Okay. And what is your answer as 60-year-old Shivank?
I don't know what's happening. I would have said there are no regrets in my life. There is nothing. Just enjoy. Do what you are really passionate about. That's what I would, say.
Okay. What other questions might 23-year-old Shivank have for 60-year-old Shivank?
Maybe जो मैं जैसा जो path पे मैं अभी चल रहा हूँ, इस path पे अगर मैं चलता रहा, so will I be able to do what I want to do? Will I be able to make the impact? Will I have a certain amount of money in my bank balance and I would be able to take care of my all other things?
Yeah.
Will I be able to pursue my things like these?
What do you think 60-year-old Shivank's answer will be?
Well, you're on the right path.
Okay. Now, you're about to say bye. 60-year-old is about to say bye to 23-year-old. And 60-year-old Shivank tells 23-year-old Shivank, he says, I love you. Don't worry. Everything will be fine. And 60-year-old Shivank is giving 23-year-old Shivank one last parting piece of advice. What is that piece of advice?
Two things. Take care of your health. Create more muscle power. You're 23. You can, make sure that your body is fit enough to sustain longer. Second thing is, spend more time with your best friends and best family members, and do what you want to, what you're passionate about, and all other things will fall in place.
Okay. Now, you are 23-year-old Shivank who is walking away after having had this conversation with 60-year-old Shivank. Just close your eyes for 30 seconds. Think about the interaction you've just had. What are the things that need to change in the way you currently lead your life, right, that you have learnt from this interaction?
Hit the gym more often. More often क्या अभी मैं कर ही नहीं रहा. I have to hit the gym. Second is try to balance a lot of things. So I go extreme if I'm doing something. So I need to bring in balance and stuff like that. Yeah. That's it. And maybe drop out and start your startup.
So now if you think about this 10 or 15 minutes we've had this conversation, all I've done is ask you questions, right, for you to introspect. And you have realized that when I'm 60 years old, this is where I want to be. This is how I would like to look back on my life in terms of what I've done. that has allowed you to look at how you currently live your life, right? And say, if that is what is important to me, then what do I need to do to change today? If I don't take care of my health now, I'm not going to be able to be there, right? If I want these friends of mine to be at my birthday party when I'm 60, I need to spend time with them. I need to focus on those relationships, you know. So coaching is that. I haven't given you any answers. I haven't told you, Shivank, do this. If I tell you, Shivank, do this, you'll be like, my coach is telling me to go to the gym, right? You're never going to be motivated, right? Here, all I'm doing is I'm allowing you to connect the dots for yourself, for you to find answers, and then for you to experiment. Now, today it may not be the gym. It may be playing squash or badminton or dance or whatever it is, might be yoga, aerobics, right? But that's for you to figure out. So this is an example of how coaching works.
Do you have regrets in life? Do you think, यार ये मुझे कर लेना चाहिए था, या ऐसा मुझे करना चाहिए तो ये थोड़ा सा better होता?
हाँ, but that's the nature of the human being. But it's no point holding on to that.
But what did you learn from those regrets? कि अगली बार ऐसा होगा तो मैं ये नहीं करूँगा.
See, I think life gives you multiple opportunities, right? But please don't think the opportunity is going to land on your plate. You have to take the opportunities.
Give us an example.
So, if I could change anything in the past, in my undergrad, I would have studied psychology, right? I would have loved to have studied psychology. But I grew up at a time where we were told, keep your options open. If you study science, you can do commerce after that. But if you take commerce, then you can't take science, right? There are people in this room who got this. If you do commerce say arts jate. In fact, in our time, if you studied arts meant you are a duffer. Life that was true to myself. I didn't spend enough time with people that I cared about. If you look at the Harvard Happiness Project, which was conducted over, I think it now must be about 85 years now, right? They have found that across income groups, across countries. So now that could be a regret. But the fact is that today, I'm learning so much about psychology because I'm making the effort. I'm talking to people, I'm reading books, So I think looking back regret is not useful, but what is useful is learning from the past and using that to inform how you do things in the future.
Tell us some learnings that you have had recently.
Yeah.
जो आपने change करा है अपने उसमें, and then you are, regrets, यार ये मेरी learning है, अगली बार मैं ऐसी चीज़ नहीं करूँगा, या अगली बार मैं इस चीज़ को ऐसे करूँगा.
I think one of the learnings, so for example, I'll give you a recent one, is I went for a tour in Southeast Asia in October last year, right? So I was doing shows in Cambodia, Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, there's one more country, I forget which one. And it was an ego trip, right? Because as comedians, हमारे ego में रहता है. I had never performed in Cambodia before. I had never performed in Vietnam before, right? Some of the other Singapore, Thailand, all that I had done. So for me it was, now I can say I've performed in so many countries, right? But in order to do that tour, I cancelled a family holiday, right? Which I realized soon after was a mistake because that is not based on my values, right? So the next time eventually we took that family holiday, but the next time I realized I'm not going to do that again because that was driven partly by my ego. Partly of course I love performing in clubs. I love performing in new countries and figure out what makes different audiences tick. But it was driven by ego and that's not who I am. So that was a recent learning which I'm trying not to make that mistake again.
We'll go to the last part, rapid fire. लेकिन उससे पहले we just want to touch the psychology part because you are one of your job as a leadership coach is to interact with people. Tell us some insights from psychology and from people that you have gathered, which help you, meet new people, which help you change, remove that layer, remove that persona layer. Because, we all have a persona, we all have a mask. How do you see the authentic people? Tell us some interesting psychology and facts about people.
See, the thing you have to understand is nobody cares about you. Nobody cares about you. Your parents maybe, but nobody cares about you. They care about themselves. Right? Now, when you interact with people, if you can demonstrate, and I'm not talking about faking it, if you can genuinely care about them, right? If they can see that you're interested in them, in their well-being, in their growth, that is what allows them to open up and be honest with you. And when you get to that level of honesty, then you can do some real work. Otherwise, very often people will tell you things they think you want to hear, right? There are a lot of people who are very good at giving you the right answer, you know, the thing that sounds right. It may sound authentic and vulnerable and whatever, but it's not genuine and honest, you know. But I think if you can show people that, one, you genuinely care about them, and two, that there's nothing wrong with being imperfect. We're all imperfect in some way or the other, right? And it's perfectly normal to have envy or jealousy or whatever the case, and that's fine, right? But if you can get people comfortable enough around you to be their true selves, then that allows you to genuinely be able to help them on their path, is my belief.
So this is a very important thing. The deepest insights come out when you ask these people questions in a very non-threatening environment.
Yeah.
How do you achieve comfort around people?
I think it comes down to your personality, right? It comes down to your personality. See, trust doesn't happen overnight by falling off a chair and somebody catches you, all those games. It doesn't happen. One of the things that helps is self-disclosure. If I am able to be honest with you and share my vulnerabilities and my weaknesses, then automatically the other person feels more comfortable in sharing theirs. So you have to be willing to open up as well. Yeah, if you want the other person to open up.
Got it. So this is a rapid fire round. इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें पूछेंगे, आप बिल्कुल मस्ती से बताना.
जरूर.
Recently कोई ऐसी movie या series देखी है that you loved?
It's not recent, but the first thought that comes to my mind, there was a movie by Adam Sandler called Zohan. I think I don't know if the full I think Return of the Zohan or whatever, which was hilarious, just so silly and stupid. There was also there's an English version and an American version. I'm talking about the English version. There was a movie called Death at a Funeral. Hilarious, must watch.
Best book, because आपने Seth Godin, Adam Grant, बहुत सारी books का नाम लिया, and I'm thinking you're reading a lot.
Yeah.
Tell us about certain books which had most impact on your life.
2 books. One is the Bhagavad Gita, and the second book is Go Giver.
By
Bob, I'm forgetting his name, but it has 2 authors. It's called the Go Giver.
जो भगवत गीता है ना, ये बड़ा क्लीशेड आंसर है. बहुत सारे लोग बोलते हैं. Tell us कि आपने बोला कि भगवत गीता had most impact on your life.
Yeah.
Tell us why.
I'll tell you why. Because what happens is, and frankly speaking, I'm actually halfway through it. The most irritating question I get, whenever somebody sees me reading it or asks me, or if I mention in a conversation, what really irritates me is when they say, "Acha, which version? Kiska likha hua pad rahe ho?" And then everybody offers an opinion as to why this version is the best.
Right.
I think what I'm finding very relevant about the book is how it is relevant across the ages. I can see applications to that in my own life, right? In terms of how the lessons in that are still relevant to me today, are still relevant in terms of how I take decisions, the things that matter to me or don't, where is their ego, where is their insecurity. So for me, I've literally on my phone, normally when I read books, I underline and I make notes. I didn't want to do that on the Gita. So on my phone, I've got a list of the paragraphs that have really resonated. And I go back to them and I keep reading them.
Like, give some examples.
Yeah, I'll have to literally, I can't give you because I don't have the Gita in front of me. But hang on. So here are my notes. So 3.9, 3.27, 3.33, 4.21, I've literally got them written down.
Wow.
So I've got as far as 8.8.
Wow.
So like I said, I'm halfway through it.
Got it.
So yeah, those are my
Wow.
those are my notes of the paragraphs that really resonate and I want to go back to.
How many countries have you given shows?
Oh, now you're fanning my ego. I think I stopped counting a long time ago in terms of the number of shows, but I'd say about 3,000 shows in 30 countries so far.
सबसे इंटरेस्टिंग कंट्री कौन सी लगी?
Interesting countries सब होते हैं. You just have to take the interest. So I find all countries interesting.
ऐसे लोग जहाँ की है ना साइकोलॉजी आपको बड़ी चेंज लगी, which यार की गजब की चीज़ें यहाँ पर होती है.
See, it's I'll give you 3 examples. In the US, a lot of it is what I call the McDonald's of comedy. Right? It's fast food. Here's a joke, here's a joke, here's a joke. You have to make it simple. Especially on the West Coast, very often, stand-up comedy is a means to an end. I want to do my 7 minutes. I want to get noticed. I want to get a development deal for a sitcom. It's about getting to TV. In the UK, when I was doing stand-up, live comedy was an art form in itself. So people will come and they have the patience to listen to a 3-minute story if you have a payoff at the end. So that was the UK. It's like fine dining. In Southeast Asia, audiences can be quite polite, right? So when you crack a joke, you know it's a good joke. You're like, clap, you fuckers, that was really good. Right? And also I do a lot of crowd work with them to make them react and interact and poke and prod. In India, English language stand-up comedy is slightly different to many parts of the world because all over the world, at least in the West, it's a very grassroots art form. Anti-establishment, anti-elite. In India, English language comedy is performed for the elite. Right? So very often, your audience is well-traveled, not always, but hopefully well-read. So you're coming at it from a slightly different angle. You know. That being said, every audience is different. Every audience, every city. When you get on stage, in the first 3 minutes, you know whether it's going to be an easy show or whether you're going to have to work for it. And over the course of the show, you've got to figure out what makes that audience tick. So
because you're
it's that, sorry, if I may,
please.
it's that ability to be agile enough to be able to react to what's happening in the moment and change and adapt.
Is there any way that we can cultivate that?
Yes, by doing it more and more and more and more. As a comedian, you learn nothing from a good show. You just walk off stage thinking I'm a king. Right? At a bad show, you're getting feedback every 15 seconds. Every 15 seconds, if they are not laughing, you are failing. If you don't have the experience or the expertise to adapt on the spot, I mean, there's nothing worse than trying to make people laugh and getting 10 minutes of silence. You feel like an idiot. You want to dig a hole and bury yourself. You have to ask yourself on the way home, if I'm ever again in the same country with a similar audience of a similar background, what can I do differently so I don't look like a fool? If there are other comedians who are performing on that show and you've had a terrible show, are there guys who are doing well? Can you see what they're doing really well? What can you learn from that? Today, when I'm faced with any challenge that is new to me, the first thing I do is pick up the phone, call up the 3 people I know who are best at dealing with that situation, saying, this is what I'm doing. What in your experience should one do? And can you guide me towards the correct resources for me to learn how to deal with that? And then you learn.
कभी फकअप हुआ है स्टेज पे?
अरे कितने सारे
सबसे बड़ा फकअप क्या था जिससे आपको बहुत बड़ी इंसाइट मिला?
I was doing a show, the worst show I've possibly ever done was in Mumbai. There were 600 people. It was an awards night. Normally with comedy, you want intimacy, you want people close, you want eye contact. I was on a stage that was 20 foot high. The closest table was 50 feet away. They had 12 tables of senior guys, maybe about 200, whatever, 150 people, completely sober. Behind them were 600 people drunk out of their minds, right? I got on stage and I did not have the experience at that time to know how to deal with that crowd. And I completely bombed. And when you're playing a show and you got paid for it, otherwise I could have, at this point, I would have told them, you know, I have far greater experience to deal with that.
अब तो पैसे लिए.
So I just vomited out my 20 minutes or 25 minutes that I had to do and got off stage. So that was one of the worst shows I've ever had. But now over the course of time, I've learned how to deal with those situations. See, the thing with comedy also is music can run in the background. For us, people have to shut up and listen. Right? Now, when you come to a theatre or a comedy club, you've come with the intention to listen to comedy. Right? At an awards night, they haven't come. They've come to drink with their pals, collect their award, party and leave. You are telling these people, please shut up and listen to this guy. They don't want to. You know, so there are some shows where you can't win because the environment is against you.
In this environment, just आप इतने सारे shows करते हो. Basically, the idea is to, make people laugh.
Yes.
And manage the crowd.
Yes.
Tell us 3-4 insights in this both thing. कि एक आदमी को हंसाने के लिए what are some 3-4 insights that you have which you can give distill to the person, and दूसरा चीज इतने बड़े crowd को कैसे manage करते हो?
Two things. First one is, we'll come back to the इतने बड़े crowd को. Two things are very powerful: topical content and local content. Topical is what is happening in the news now. Best example I can give you of that is Amul. If you see the Amul advertisement, something happens yesterday, that is topical content, right? Local content. If I crack a joke about Gurgaon in Gurgaon, very funny. If I crack that same joke in Singapore, they won't know what, right? So when you're trying to make people laugh, firstly, as a comedian, you have to decide how much time I invest, time, money, effort, energy, because topical content doesn't last the test of time, right? If you take an Amul ad from today and do it 6 months later, it's not going to be relevant. Local content doesn't travel well, right? But if you're trying to make people laugh, if you can do jokes about something that is going on currently in their lives or in their environment, or about things that are personal to them, very local to them, that is incredibly powerful. So that's one. In terms of audiences,
लेकिन इससे पहले एक छोटी सी बात, आपने जो लोकल कंटेक्स्ट की बात की, आपने 30 कंट्रीज में शो करा है, एंड यू आर एन इंडियन.
yes.
हाउ डू यू डेल्व एंड गेट दैट कंटेक्स्ट कि अगर मैं स्विट्जरलैंड में बात कर रहा हूँ तो
Before I go for a show, I ask the promoter over there, please keep the last 10 days worth of newspapers. I read about their history, their politics, their scandals. I talk to the taxi drivers, I talk to the local comedians. I get their point of view on all these things. Then my first 10 minutes are purely about them. Then I've got them. Then I take them beyond their borders. In terms of dealing with large audiences, it is much easier to perform. So I've performed for over 10,000 people. I've performed for 3 people for 1 hour. Okay.
ये कब था?
At the Edinburgh Festival. That's a different story. It is much easier to perform for 10,000 people.
Right.
Because from 10,000 people, if 3,000 people also don't laugh, no problem.
वो बाकी के उनको
Right?
सकते हैं.
If you're performing for 11 people and 6 people don't laugh, the other 5 also will think, I don't want to look like the odd one, मैं भी चुप रह जाता हूँ. Right? But once you learn how to make an audience of 6 people laugh, 6,000 is makhan. The other thing that is very important to understand, different audiences enjoy things differently. I remember once I was doing a show at a comedy club and people were going crazy, clapping, cheering, banging on chairs. The next day, I was doing this very posh art center somewhere in the UK, and people were smiling, they were nodding, and I thought, my God, kya bakwas show hai, it's such a terrible show. You know, they're not clapping and cheering and banging on chairs. Then when I finished the show, so many people came up to me and said, oh, PapaCJ, we loved it. That's when I realized that different audiences enjoy things differently. The test of an audience is not how much they're laughing or clapping. When you pause, how much silence there is. Then you know you've got them in the palm of your hand, hanging on to every single word. Think about it. Let's assume I have a theater of 1,500 people. If 200 people laugh, I've got laughter. Right? 50 people clap, I've got applause. But silence requires all 1,500 to participate.
वो कैसे होता है? How do you nudge the crowd to be silent?
You practice and you practice and you practice and you practice and you learn and you get there.
Wow. Can you tell us the worst, most challenging time in your life?
Yeah.
When you were at a very low end?
Yeah. I was married once and I went through a divorce. And the divorce laws and the way divorce takes place in our country is not a pleasant experience. So I think that was possibly one of the most stressful.
Any learnings from them? Learnings from that hard thing?
It'll sound biased and bitter. So my learnings are mostly about the institution of marriage. The process of finding a life partner, I think it's very important to ensure that both of you have the same value systems, because romantic love initially can be butterflies and Very often you think you've fallen in love, but you've fallen in lust actually, right? And lust and sex can very often cloud the brain and lead you to take decisions that may not be aligned with a good long-term future. So it's for men, it's important to use the brain that is here and not the brain that is.
This is something very important. I just want to go thoda sa
Please.
deeper.
Again, I'm speaking, just to put this in context, I'm speaking from a bias based on my personal experience.
Completely
so
fine.
this is not a standard, you know.
But we want to get this thought. 20, 23, 24.
Yeah.
अगले 5 साल में तुम्हारे पेरेंट्स saying कि शादी कर देंगे शादी कर देंगे शादी कर देंगे.
Yeah.
What's your problem
Yeah.
with the institution of marriage? Roast it.
See, I don't want to.
No, but honest reality,
I'll
because we
get-
are going to face that.
I will majorly be trolled for anything I say.
Completely fine.
See, I don't think there's a problem in the institution of marriage. I think it's a wonderful institution that can work well for many people. It's just that I've seen a lot of people for whom it hasn't worked well for. And a lot of people I know, 90%, this is again, I'm going to get majorly trolled for this. See, often what happens is, and this is a very stereotypical response, there are major exceptions to this, so I'm just qualifying this before you troll me, but you're welcome to. And again, I'm colored by my experience. Very often also what happens is that, I think I heard somebody say this to me, which is that a boy marries a girl for who she is. A girl marries a boy for who she thinks he is capable of becoming. Now, what happens is, after you get married, the girl changes and the boy doesn't, right? And the boy is thinking, where is the person who I married? Who are you? And the girl is thinking, yeah, you are the same. Tu to wahi hai. You haven't grown, you haven't improved, you are still an immature child. So, I mean, it's a very stereotypical thing. Obviously, it's a broad generalization. But sometimes that's what happens. So, I think it's very useful to have honest conversations with your potential spouse about difficult topics before you get into a marriage. You know, what is your opinion on finances? What parents, children, do you want to have children at all? You know, where do you want to live? You know, so it's important to have these conversations as opposed to discover some of these things that, oh my God, we are not on the same page on how we want to bring up our children, and that's a major problem for me. So you want to have those conversations before you get into a situation where it's a bigger thing. So I think this is where I'm saying that instead of just the art, maybe you need to bring in some of the science as well. So,
got it.
yeah. But again, I mean, it's we've seen people who are completely opposite in their way have the most beautiful relationships. So, I mean, there's no right or wrong to this. You know, anything I say, there are tons of people out there who will say, oh yeah, he's completely right, and tons of people say, what an idiot, he's talking crap, right? And both of them are right.
True.
Because it really comes down to you.
ट्रोलिंग की आपने बात की, ऐसा कभी हुआ है कि आपको हेट आया इंटरनेट पे, एंड हाउ डू यू डील विद दैट, डील विद द ट्रोल, डील विद द हेट?
So yes, I have got it. Firstly, see, I'm not a very controversial person. I try and stay away from controversy. By nature of who I am, I'm not interested in religion or politics, so I hardly talk about it. I'm not well informed enough to comment on politics. I don't do the reading, right? I can't keep up with the reading. So, and it's not in need of interest. Also, I am the kind of comic who I get on stage to make people happy. I'm not there to prove a point. So, I have no problem, I pick on people. I have no problem teasing you. I have no problem embarrassing you. I don't ever want to be hurtful. I have no problem if somebody walks out saying, yeah, CJ ने मेरी band बजा दी. No problem. I don't want a single person walking out thinking मुझे बुरा लगा. Right? That's the nature of who I am. Now it's different for different people. There is no right way. For some people, you know, I mean, there's a wonderful saying, I think it's Mary Hirsch who said that comedy is like a rubber sword. You can make a point without drawing any blood, right?
Wow.
So for some people, making that point is more important. For me, I will go to hospitals and do free shows for children with cancer. That's my way of making an impact. When it comes to trolling, I strongly believe in the quote by George Bernard Shaw. He said, never wrestle with a pig, because you get dirty and the pig enjoys it.
And choose your battle wisely.
So I ignore it. Yeah, I don't want to spend my life fighting with people on the internet. Makes no difference to my life.
What's your next thing on your bucket list, CJ?
See, my bucket list has only one item. My only goal in life is to outlive my parents so I can look after them in their golden years. I don't have a bucket list, so to say, but one of the things I'm trying to do right now is, and it's going to be a lot of effort, is to create a 40-hour course for a university. I don't know if I'll get there because it's a lot of work, but which brings to the table all of the learnings I've had over the years, which are unique to me, around authenticity, vulnerability, storytelling, communication, comedy, the power of using humor in business and in life, what some of the skills are from a career like stand-up comedy, which you can leverage in other aspects of your life. So that's something that I would like to create, but it's going to take me quite some time and a lot of work and a lot of introspection, because a lot of what I do is practical. It comes unconsciously. But for me to break it down and find the theoretical way of explaining that to somebody is going to be difficult, because I'm going to have to try and analyze it and break it down and present it in a way that's easily learnable for other people.
And who are some people जिनको आप बहुत ज़्यादा admire करते हो? डॉक्टर रितेश मलिक को एक सेकंड साइड में रख देते हैं.
That was the first name. I was going to say, I admire tons of people, you know, but for me, so for example, in the world of comedy, there are different people who bring different things to the table, you know. So Russell Peters is a friend, and he's one of the most large-hearted guys I've seen. Stephen K. Amos, who's a comedian in the UK, just his charisma on stage. Andrew Maxwell, he's so well-read. Adam Hills, he's the kind of comedian you walk out of the show feeling all warm and fuzzy, you know. Reg D. Hunter, again, what charisma. I mean, he can talk about anything, you love him. Jason Byrne can walk onto stage and spend 45 minutes talking about the curtains in the room. You know, that ability to... So, see, my approach towards people, I think it was Andrew Carnegie who wrote about this. He said that, and he spoke about this when talking about coaching. And I believe that actually, if you take anything away from this podcast, take this one thing away. This is when you go looking for gold, you have to get past tons of dirt before you find some gold. But you don't go there looking for dirt. You go there looking for gold. So when I meet people, I look for the gold in them, not the dirt.
This has been super insightful. Your last thing, you are the master of roasting. और अगर आपको जाने दिया without किसी को roast करे, so that will be bad on our part. So 2 मिनट के लिए roast भी.
I don't need to roast you, my friend. Nature has already done that to you.
Thanks a lot, man. Really
My pleasure.
grateful.
Thank you for having me.
Done.